Hi, fellow Django developers. Hezekiah here from Always Django, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you feel find this video important. Let's get into it. So today we are going to look at Django Rest Framework class-based API views, right? In the last tutorial, we looked at functional-based API views, right? How we can create APIs in Django REST Framework using functions, right? And that was where we created this very simple API view for our this very simple API view, right? That's why in our URL we have it here, right? So our server is on. Our server is on right now. Let me increase my the size of this. So that's probably big. So that's our server is on right now. That's why if we go to Postman, if you don't know about Postman, please go and download it. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I talked about that in the last tutorial. So that was why if we come here, use Postman, hit this endpoint, and we'll get this response right here. Message, this is a post request, right? Because we are making a post request here. So when you are using functional API views, right, you have to run this if else statement to check if the request is a post request or a get request or otherwise, right? So but for class-based API views, which we are going to look at, right? So just like its name implies, we have to create a class, right? So if we create a class, right, we create a class right now and say maybe let's call this our API view, right? So our API view, let's say pass here. Now to make this a valid Django REST Framework API view, right? We'll first of all import from REST Framework, from REST Framework dot views, right? We import API view, right? So if we import API view, we make this class inherit from API view, right? So just by doing this our class is now a valid Django API view. Now the interesting thing about API views is that you don't have to run these if statements right here. So for your API views, the method, the request method you want to handle, you handle them as a method, right, in this class, right? For instance, let's say we have get method, sorry, obviously we have get method, right? We have post method, we have put method, we have the patch method, and we have delete, right? There are obviously more than this. I think they have option and things like that, right? So but these are the basic 5 that I know that are used frequently, right? So what I'm trying to say is that to handle a get request right now, you handle it as a method in this class. Let's say you want to handle a get request. What you have to do is that you say get, right, function, you say get, right, self, right, as self request, right? So this is the method you want to handle. This is the get request you want to handle. If you want to handle post request, this will be post right here, right? So because we are handling get, we say get right here. If you also handle delete, this will be delete, right? So this self is because obviously we are using a class, right? So this request is the request that is passing to every class, every method in Django, right? So let's return a response right here. Response, right? Let's say data. The data of our response will be message. This is a get request, right? So let's use this in our urls.py file. Let's go to urls.py file. Let's say from base or views, let's import this right here, right? So if we import this, we use it, right? So because it's a class, right? If you know about Django class based views, because it's a class, we don't just declare it just like that here, right? So we say as view, right? So we use this as view method, right? So right now, if we go to our terminal is still running. Hopefully it is. So our terminal is still running, right? So if we go back to postman, change this to get request, because we want to make a get request right here and send it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you see message, this is a get request, right? So let me make it, this is a get request from class based view so that it will be obvious. So let's say this is the get request from class based API view, right? To make it very much obvious, right? So this is reloading. So if we go back, make the request once more, this is a get request from a class based API view, right? So hopefully you get the gist, right? So let's say we want to handle a post request, because that's very common. So we say get def, that's defining a function in Python, self request, right? So we say we return response and say in the response we say data message, this is a post request. Our spelling is probably wrong, from class based view. So our spelling is probably wrong. That's because I'm bad at typing and talking at the same time. Spelling is probably wrong, but who cares, right? So if we go back to postman, make this request again, but change this to post, make this request again. Hopefully we see this is a post request from class based view, right? So the next question is, about post request, right? Post request has bodies, right? So if we come here, we can say the body will be raw. We'll say raw, then we'll say JSON, then we'll come here, we can declare a body and say maybe name is maybe always Django, right? Let's say we want to send this, let's say right now we are sending this body parameter with our request, right? So but how can we access it, right? So if we come back here to access our request body, we simply say, let's say name is equal to access our request body, we say request dot data, right? So this is a dictionary that contains all our requests. That's the dictionary that contains our request body, right? So it's something like this, a Python dictionary, obviously. So it's something like this. Maybe we have name, name here, and maybe always Django, like we specified, always Django, right? So if you want to access the name parameter in the request parameter, we say dot, right? Because this is the dictionary, we say get, right? Python get method, dictionary get method. So let's change this to maybe message. Let's leave the message and say maybe name is name, right? So if we have the content of the name that was passed in, right? So we will come back here and say name is always Django. Let's send this request again. Fingers crossed, you can see name here is always Django, right? So you can pass in the name, you can pass in the age, you can pass in. So if let's say we are passing in the age, let's say age is equal to request dot data dot get age, right? So if we come here, we say maybe age is age, right? So if we come here while making a request, we specify that, let's say age is, let's say 24, right? So if we send this request, we'll probably hopefully, let me change this to a string. Hopefully, let me send again. So let's go back to our server. I think our server is down, so let me restart the server. So if we restart the server and send the request one more time, you can see age is 24, right? So another thing, in the last tutorial I said I'll talk about this response, right? How we can send a custom status code with our response while sending our response, right? So if you come here, if you come to Postman, you can see our status code is 200, right, which is okay. But let's say we are making a request and maybe the user is not authorized or something like that. I want to customize the response code, right? So if we come here, to this response method, it accepts another argument, which is the status, right? So status, we can say maybe status is 400. There are many status codes ranging from 100 to 500, I guess. The 100 should be, it should 200 should be okay. 300 is information. 400 is client error. 500 is the server error. I think it's from 200 to 500. I don't know, maybe somebody correct me in the comment section. I think it's from 200 to 500. 200 is for okay. 300 is for information. 400 is for client error. 500 is for server error, I guess. Maybe there is 100, I don't know, man. So there is 400 range, right? You can have 401, which is not authorized. You can have 402, which is not permitted or something like that, right? You can have 200, which is obviously okay. You can have 201, which is created, right? So there's no how you expect yourself to know all these status codes and what they do. That's why in Django Rest Framework, thankfully, we have something like Rest Django Rest dot status. We import status from here, right? So if you want to specify a status right now, you come here, you say status, right? Press dot. If you press dot, you see, okay, we have 100, right? Have 100. 100 is continue. 101 is switching protocol. Then we'll have the 200. Okay, we have various other things, right? So let's say we want to return a response code of 400 right now, right? So we can say 4, or so if you come here, come down. So here you can specify the HTTP request you want to make. Let's say for instance you want to make a 400 request, 400 which is bad request, unauthorized, 401 unauthorized, 400 bad request, etc. Right? So you specify this, you say status dot the type of request you want to make, right? So but before we continue, I want to say this. I don't think I have to, but let me just say it, right? So this part of the video, I made it different from the beginning part of the video, right? Because like the beginning part, my system went off and I had to record this separately. Maybe you don't notice really because of how we edit the video and things like that, but in case you see any glitch or difference, that's what caused it, right? So if you specify the HTTP request, that's right here, you specify 400 here. Then if you go back to your Postman with your server on, let me check if my server is on. I guess not, so it's not on. I will say python manage the py run server, right? So hopefully our server starts. So hopefully our server starts. I don't know why it's taking a little bit of time, but hopefully, let me see if I have anything running on my server right now. Okay. Okay, nothing is running, just for the server to start. I'm sorry for the waste of time. So performance system check, so the server is on. If we go back, make this request again, hopefully the status code will change from 200 to 400, right? So if you check here, if you see here, you can see that the status codes are changed from 400 bad requests to, from 200 good requests to 400 bad requests, right? So this class right here, this status class, contains a lot of your requests, a lot of the kind of request status code that you want to send back, right? So you have the bad request, you have the 100 range, you have the 200 range, you have the 300 range, the 400 range, the 500 range. So technically all the requests, all the types of requests that you want to make, right? So that is it.
Yeah, so that's it for this video necessarily. That's it for this video necessarily. In the next video, we'll be looking at generic API views, right? So this is simply API view, your simple Django REST Framework API view, right? So we said you create a class, inherit from it, then the API views, the Django REST Framework API view handles request method using the class methods, right? Like this get method right here will handle get request, this post will handle post request, and what have you. So in the next tutorial, we'll be looking at Django API view, which is a bit simpler than API view, right? Even though I prefer API view. And in the mini project we are going to be working on in this series, right? In this playlist, I'll be using API view, right? But Django API view is a little bit needs a little less configuration, right? But I prefer using API view because it gives me the ability to do exactly what I want to do by myself, right? And we'll get to understand. I'll get to look into that, and that will be it. So take care of yourself. Subscribe if you haven't. Share, like, and peace.